everybody. It's Tree Planters Podcast here, Adam and Margaret, and today we're joined by Mary Wagner from the Friends of Simcoe Forest. I think we've got a few updates of things that have been going on, things that we're thinking, and then we're going to be talking to Mary about what's happening with some issues in the Simcoe County Forest. So, Adam, anything really interesting this past week that you want to share or things that you're thinking about?
Yeah. One thing which I've been really happy to see has been the closure of a portion of street in Barrie. You'll notice I'm using the singular, so I'm hoping that they're going to expand on that and close some more streets. We talked about this in our last episode, and how that helps people physically distance safely. And it's also, I think we also talked about this, it's also sort of taken a step in the direction of setting the community up for better resilience in the future with the impacts of climate change and mitigating those impacts as well, with recognizing the need to shift from a reliance on cars and fossil fuels. So I've been pleased to see that. I don't know. I go back and forth between being a glass half full and a glass half empty kind of person. I try and stay as a glass half full an optimist. And I think generally I'm successful in doing that, but every once in a while I slip into the pessimist. And when I first saw the news come out of this closure, I was definitely in a pessimist frame of mind. And some of the reasons for that, I think it's great and I think it is a step in the right direction, but I'll just point out that it's an area, Lakeshore Drive, which is aligned along the only sort of dedicated bicycle route in the city that I know of anyways, right down along the beach and the parks along the waterfront there. So the utility for it is something that I question a little bit. I sort of could see how the decision was made when you're looking at it from the perspective of, well, where are there the most people who are coming outside and therefore the greatest need for something like this to be implemented. And I think that the conclusion there is pretty obvious and just would justify that closure. But then on the other hand, and this is something that's talked about a fair bit in active transportation circles, is the framing of cyclists and pedestrians as almost a recreational thing rather than a need. So a need for people to utilize their bikes or be able to walk safely on their way to work or to access basic amenities. And I think if you shift that framing of it a little bit, you then start to question, well, why in this area and why not in other areas? For instance, enabling people to be able to access some of the downtown grocery stores more safely. And I think it's a bit of a shift in the way that we look at active transportation that's needed. I'm also a little bit worried about the lack of data collection involved. I don't think it's going to be permanent because they just spent quite a bit of money improving the streets and infrastructure down there for cars and plenty of parking too. But nevertheless, I think the data collection is important on uptake and sort of illustrating the need for these sorts of things in the future. And as far as I can see, the only data that they're collecting is feedback from residents. I think we know that feedback generally comes from people who are upset with something rather than people who are happy with something. So, some concerns, but on the whole, I'm really happy with the fact that they've done that. Anyways, I've talked a lot about that. What about you?
Well, I was just going to say as we've been talking to various people and planners, reading news, one of the things that's become clear is that risk-taking and experimentation is not a baked-in skill that governments have. Generally, they're much more glacial in pace, and experimentation and risk-taking has to become like a value and a muscle that they build. So, with the bike lanes certain cities are already kind of experimenting. It's much easier for them to try new things, and others that haven't been experimenting, it just feels very foreign to them. So if you see like London and UK, they're now bragging that they're going to be the largest global capital city that's going to be a car-free zone, right? There's places in South America that have been experimenting with all this kind of stuff because they've been used to experimenting. And I don't know if all North American cities, ones at least I'm familiar with in Ontario, are equally good at thinking, not to sound cliche, but thinking outside the box and moving away from that 1950s style of development, which is, we're still building communities like we did after World War II. And shifting from that's a big deal. So, you get on the pessimist thing, and I can appreciate with some hesitancy with it. But for me, I'm like, well, at least they're starting to experiment. And if we reward them for that and trying something new, and they don't feel like every time they stick their neck out, someone's going to be there to chop it off, then we're more likely to get better data and better projects down the road. But they have to feel like there's some reason for them to keep experimenting, because as we all know, the status quo isn't quite working. One of the things that I found really interesting over this week, talking about experimenting in the community building, was a webinar I was on by the Canadian Urban Institute that was talking about COVID and climate change. And so a lot of governments now are starting to talk about that recovery phase, what the stimulus package is going to look like, and to what groups and everything else. And, if you look into where the jobs have been lost, and there was more data put out today by the Financial Accountability Officer of Ontario. And so a lot of the job losses have happened in fields dominated by women, a lot more job losses experienced with the youth, and a lot more job losses experienced in temporary positions and those people who have low education levels. So generally, stimulus packages look like let's build roads and bridges, which would help address some of the lost jobs, but it wouldn't actually address the majority. Sorry, that was the dog in the background. So it wouldn't address all of that. And so there's infrastructure projects. I'm sorry, we have a real life here too. Yeah. But it wouldn't address basically all of where the job losses are. And so that's problematic. And the other thing is that the way that they give out the incentive and the stimulus packages is they usually have a threshold for how much the minimum you can apply for. And Infrastructure Canada has set it at $10 million. You can't put a project forward that's quote unquote shovel ready. And so what happens here is that you reward very large, expensive infrastructure projects that are complicated to implement. They're huge projects to get going and to plan, and you miss out on those incremental changes that could really make a difference in your community that are much easier to implement. So by putting that threshold so high at $10 million, there's lots of things that if you look at your own community that could be done for, say, $500,000, whether that be going into building new community food gardens, whether that goes into making parks more accessible, putting in new trail paths, those kind of things can actually help people access nature, access their community, increase the social determinants of health. But they will never get that funding because the funding is just, the threshold's too high.
It's interesting. It's almost a perverse incentive.
It's something that I thought was yeah, it is. And so you're looking at things that can be completed in 2 years with a minimum of $10 million. And that really just streamlines for certain types of projects, which aren't the kind of projects that the municipalities maybe could use or implement, or to experiment with figuring out how to get those job losses. Like Mayor Lehman was talking about how the restaurant industry in Barrie has been severely hit, and how we tend to have more restaurants in Barrie than other places. I don't know if that was done in per capita, but a high percentage. Looking, how would the infrastructure money help with that type of industry, or help boost that part, or whether it be tourism? Like, how would a huge major bridge project or a road widening project help with tourism, ecotourism, community accessibility. It just won't. So that was the major thing they were talking about. Plus, two, all of those $10 million huge projects are probably not going to be climate friendly. I mean, we're talking mostly about gray infrastructure. So your roads and sewers and bridges. And really, we have to be thinking small incremental improvements. Like we used to develop communities where it was on incremental changes and very small community people focused changes. Now it's like you don't do anything until you go big or go home. It's like we're not just going to build a house. We're going to build a block of like 800 to 1,000 houses, and we're going to take all that out at once. And it's gone from let's make slow intentional changes to let's make big, massive changes all at once.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting thing to think about as we're thinking about recovery.
Yeah, there's something that like you're with gray infrastructure, you're actually constrained by the infrastructure to a certain extent as well, right? I mean, any gray infrastructure that you put in it has an upper limit. And after that point, then it's not elastic anymore. It's not going to work. Some of the projects that they could put this money toward would be, increasing capacity of stormwater and different things like that to be able to deal with the increased runoff that we'll be likely facing as a result of climate change, and these sorts of projects that are targeting our adaptive capacities. But another problem with that is in a lot of these areas, for instance, developing on floodplains and things like that, we just shouldn't be building, right? It's costly and inefficient to continue building there. And here's where the perverse incentive comes in. If you're able to access government money, well, it's not that big of a barrier anymore. So could be a problem. How about you, Mary? Anything spring to mind when
invited someone like?
Yeah, we've got a lag on our Zoom thing here, so it might be kind of funny.
I was just going to do the same segue.
All right.
Sorry, folks.
Well, why don't you do, Margaret?
Oh, I was just going to say that's why we have Mary on, because part of what their issue is thinking about how to make improvements and to protect the things that are actually assets in our community, and have other projects that might be good additions to be placed in the proper places. So, Mary, did you have anything from this week that you thought was interesting, or do you want to get right into the meat of it all?
Well, thanks very much for having me on. I represent Friends of Simcoe Forest. We're a community group that kind of started around 2015 when we became aware that the county forests were being, I'm going to say, targeted for uses that were other than the pure enjoyment of the community. The recreation, dog walking, hunting, that the community likes to do was in jeopardy. And in 2016, we actually incorporated because we knew that we were going to be in a real serious situation. It's not unlike the county to use the forest because we seem to have a very large number of them. In particular, the Oro-Medonte Township and Springwater Township holds the majority of them. And, this area is utilized by a lot of people that come through for tourist areas, and then just local families. They want to have their children have an opportunity to actually come out into the forest and spend some time there. So let's fast forward to 2020, and wow, we have progressed through this process where the county of Simcoe wants to put in an organics facility, which we think is a fantastic idea, and also have been asked by the province to look after their own garbage. So they're going to take their garbage and bring it into one site, and they'll do a little bit of storage of garbage, but looking at the recycling and community education, a lot of really good incentives. And Friends of Simcoe Forest, the only reason we exist is because we want to keep the forest safe and feel that this type of industrial infrastructure should not be placed into a forest. It belongs in an industrial site. So we've kind of progressed through all the legal procedures and processes that have been put forward to us. We've spent an awful lot of time and energy. I'm going to say blood, sweat, and tears, because it really has been a journey for the members of this community group. And we've abided by the rules, and suddenly we find ourselves in front of an LPAT hearing, and ready to present the information that hired professionals have provided for us. And while everybody's looking the other way, I believe, in COVID, the county has asked the ministry to provide a ministerial zoning order that will just stop the process, will stop any kind of appeal, will stop any opposition from the public whatsoever, and the county will be allowed to do what it wants to do. Very, very serious consequences of this kind of thing. There's been no other MZO issued while there's been a case in front of the LPAT. So this is precedent setting. And we're not really sure what the end result is going to be. We're waiting. We have come out to the community, to the public, to other groups, to ask them to write letters to the ministry and tell them that we don't think this is appropriate. How else can the average Joe tell the government, we want you to be transparent, we want you to tell the truth, we want you to listen to us, and they turn around and actually stop us? What's the incentive for anybody then going forward to take on and question those things that are happening in your community that you and actually the majority of people feel is not right? So where do you go from there?
So just to clarify for listeners, the spot that we're talking about is anybody that's familiar with Horseshoe Valley Road. And you might know Nicklin Farms. It's kind of between Elmvale and Craighurst in that area there. But if you're familiar with Nicklin Farm Market, it's right down the road from there. So if you're someone who travels on Horseshoe Valley Road, you've probably passed that site. And when you're saying the LPAT, just because I know not everybody is engaged in land use planning as much as everybody on this, it is a body that was set up to review appeals. It is a process that is meant to be used. It is meant to be open to the public. And so your group has gone through all the process, put in all of the letters when you're supposed to, has provided input at every stage when possible. The result, you guys were appealing based on the preservation of natural heritage, some of the policies that the province has, saying that, you know, you're basically going against these kind of policies of preservation of natural heritage. You went to that appeals process to make an independent body look at the evidence to say, have they actually broken these rules or not, or policies? But for us, just for lay people, rules is good enough. And then what the county has done, even though this process of appeal, which has already been outlined and money has been spent, whatever else, the county has asked the province to basically give a veto where, yes, it's approved. There's no further questions, no further studies, no further anything is needed. You just we're giving our approval. And what would happen then for your group, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that whatever process you are in would now be null and void. And that would be the end of your struggle to have a voice for the forest.
Yeah, Margaret, you said it exactly right. It is quite disconcerting. You know, at so many times, this process has been so difficult to achieve the rules that have been outlined for us by the ministry. And they're not just difficult emotionally, but financially. Our group has done an awful lot to fundraise to try and acquire the funds we need to get the real professionals that can actually peer review the county's studies. An example of that would be the environmental study that was done by the county We brought in an environmental professional, biologist, and they found more species at risk. They found that we were looking in the Freele Forest in particular at significant forest, significant woodland, and significant wildlife habitat, which was really downplayed by the county professionals. That's just one example of the struggle that has been going on over the last 4 years for us, and to now reach a point where it could be by a stroke of a pen, all just null and void. It really is quite disheartening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially when there is adequate industrial sites that the county could use, such as down by Napoleon's, or there's places within Springwater as well, that are quote unquote industrial sites that have just as easy access to the 400, close to where there were, garbage would be collected. The majority of it would be collected. So it's not that this is the only place that's feasible, although this is the place that made the list from the county's perspective. There are other sites that this could be moved to that are more appropriate.
Yeah, that's correct. Springwater, the previous council did state that they were happy to host this facility within their township on an appropriate industrial site. But it seemed that the county had made a decision that they weren't going to look anywhere else. They put on blinders, it seems, and wanted to go straight ahead for this particular property. And we've been just trying to educate them and change their mind. So at this point in time, we are continuing with our letter campaign. We're continuing with pressure. We're asking official opposition to take a look at what the Conservative government is doing. Unfortunately, there have been 4 Ministerial Zoning Orders put in throughout the province. All have happened since the COVID pandemic started. And it's unfortunate because people's lives have really kind of zoomed in at really just looking at, trying to survive because they're losing their jobs, trying to stay quarantined because they're worried about their health. And life has gotten so busy and we've become so centered that we are not paying as much attention to what's happening out and around us. And I wonder at some point if this is not part of the reason why these MZOs kind of got issued and people didn't respond to them.
I know one of the zoning orders was issued in Barrie here, right, for the seniors facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there were a couple other down in closer to Toronto. One of which significantly impacts a provincially significant wetland.
Yeah. So when the Conservative government, I think, opened up, Ontario was open for business. There was an awful lot of push into areas that were protected or where there was pushback. And I think maybe these MZOs are just a way to circumvent, the processes, the procedures that are in place, the rules for the government and citizens to follow. And in particular for the county, they're stating that COVID is causing too long a delay. There is money tied to this particular project that is going to be null and void if it goes on too long. But the reality is that Friends of Simcoe Forest hasn't necessarily been the one tying up things and slowing down the process. And that money has been available and renewed every 2 years for them. So I'm not sure that those are legitimate or reasons that could be validated to actually ask for an MZO and not allow the LPAT process to continue and have all the issues that were raised by the Friends of Simcoe Forest actually come under the eye of someone who is objective, independent, and makes a decision based on the facts in front of them.
Do you know if there's a bar, a test that needs to be met for issuing an MZO?
No, I'm not really sure what the government criteria is on it. I mean, the ministry has issued the official planning amendment. They approved that. So that's also, I don't know if you'd call that a conflict, but certainly they are the ones that approved the OPA. And now they're being asked to issue the MZO because not just Friends of Simcoe Forest, but two other appellants were deemed to be valid appeals through the LPAT system. And the three appellants have been kind of vetoed, I guess, if the MZO comes out from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So it's I don't really see that there's any kind of independent overview if that's the case. It seems like the county and the ministry are the only two players in this whole situation, which is, not really a positive thing in my view.
Margaret, you'd mentioned that there's been some talk around jobs associated with this, and that they're using that as a rationale to push forward with it.
Yeah, as far as I know, that kind of this MZO, and for those, like I said, the lay people out there, it's like a veto power, and to go back to whether there's a threshold, my understanding, it's up to the ministers. It's the minister's discretion. It's not like it's not like you have to provide various amounts of studies. MZOs in the past have been issued at the very beginning of a process where environmental studies haven't even been completed. I believe that was down in, there's a Canadian Tire warehouse facility, I believe, where that kind of went in near the beginning. So they can be issued kind of all the way out. And the fact that there's not a standardized kind of, this is when you can issue an MZO and it can be done anywhere throughout the process, harkens back to the idea that there's not a minimum threshold of what needs to be there. But our understanding is that municipalities are putting forward across the province, are putting forward projects that they think will boost employment, and asking, if you think you have a project that could boost employment, maybe this is the time to ask for an MZO to get this project through without further delay. So, Mary, I wasn't sure whether your group has looked into the jobs claim, because I know from my history with other applications that happen with development, there's a big talk about jobs. And really, when you scratch the surface, it's usually very inflated. It talks about man years versus good paying, stable jobs. And most of the jobs that are going to come from the big development companies in Toronto, they have their own crews. So it's not even necessarily going to local people. There are jobs, but they're already spoken for. So is there any reasonableness to the claims for jobs, or have you guys gotten into that?
We haven't really delved into that. At this point in time, we're still trying to argue on the point of the site itself. And just to kind of bring us back to the fact that, we think providing jobs for people is applaudable, and we're not against that whatsoever. We want the jobs for people. We want to have the county look after their own waste. We just don't want it in a forest. So I think from the Friends of Simcoe Forest perspective, Margaret, it isn't something that we'd argue the site on jobs, because we are for this particular project, just not into a forest. So again, going down the line, if they do go ahead and issue the MZO, then there will be all these other things that will come into play, and can they be validated? And a lot of it will have to do with traffic, with noise, with, are they actually going to be able to provide the jobs that they're saying? I do know from early days that the county was not going to run the facility. They were going to farm it out. That more than likely wouldn't be a local business, and likely be somebody from Southern Ontario, one of the big waste facilities or the waste companies that would be involved in that. So we haven't really broken it down and looked at it in that particular way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I find it interesting that there's this discussion about red tape. And whenever we discuss red tape, it almost always comes down to there's too much regulation in the environmental sector, right? This regulation is really bogging us down. And I think if you look at this case here, to your point, you're not arguing that we can't provide jobs, that we shouldn't do organics processing, that we shouldn't try to divert our waste. And so really, it's not a environment or jobs, environment or economy. You can actually have both in this situation. You can be environmentally stringent as well as provide jobs and boost the economy. And building in that particular forest where there's active agricultural operations around, where there is a strong local business, Nicklin Farms, who could potentially be impacted by this, is also impacting the existing economy, right? So as I'm listening to governments discuss about what happens next and kind of projects like these that are supposed to provide jobs, but it's the environment that's the problem. The environment's stopping us from getting these jobs. Really, you have to go back farther and go, no, at some point, someone decided the environment wasn't as important as access to cheap land, expediency to get the application done, expediency to get the land cleared, whatever those decisions were. But now we're set up in a situation where it's supposed to look like, well, we couldn't do it the environmentally friendly way and everybody needs jobs. And that isn't the case here. And nor do I think that's the case for many of these kind of false dichotomies where it's like we have to choose one or the other, right?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Margaret, because the county's argument is that we are jamming things up, we are holding things up. And the reality is we're just speaking up for the environment and the significance of this particular forest and many of the forests. You know, we've got a ground source water recharge area that runs into Matheson Creek. Like everything is so fragilely connected that to just throw away a piece of forest and natural heritage and green space is while the rest of the world is saying let's plant trees, here locally we are destroying and taking down an area like this when there is land already available. Yes, you are going to have to pay for it. But, you know, if you went to the citizens of Springwater and to Simcoe, they probably would give you the $2 a year that you need to go out and purchase industrial land. It's just, as you say, it's easier to go here because the land is free and we own it and we're the proponent and we're going to go ahead with this. It's easy peasy for them. And as you say, they do not value the natural heritage, the significant woodland, and the significant wildlife habitat that exists here as much as they do to get this project going. And that's what we're trying to educate them about.
All of which are costs as well, right? Like, impacts on wildlife and habitat and the environment there, water quality potentially, it sounds like as well. Those are all costs. They're just not sort of being properly recognized by the county, it seems. And all of those costs often, we were talking about earlier, the need for municipalities to upgrade infrastructure to deal with the increased impacts of climate change. That's a similar cost to what they'll likely be encountering here in some respects anyways, that a lot of these decisions seem to be made in isolation of the environment. And you simply can't disconnect anything that you do in this world from the impacts that it will have on the environment, on the surrounding environment. And so those impacts need to be considered.
Oh, absolutely. When it came to the final the selection sites, the majority of them were forests. And the county has kind of decided that these forests are free land for them. And a lot of them are on the chopping block. And I think people need to realize that this is not the first forest that has been utilized and taken down to accommodate buildings that the county has wanted to do. And it certainly won't be the last. So we have to stay aware and argue that no, forests are important. We'll get to the point where, they will be rare within the county of Simcoe if they keep going the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Forests are important, and proper community engagement. I think
people need to recognize.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, and I was going to say, people just need to recognize too that Simcoe County Forest is the largest municipally owned forest system, I believe, in Southern Ontario, central Southern Ontario. It might be in Ontario, but for sure it's that. And, the county does use the forest a lot for pulp and paper and logging and that sort of thing. And as you know, there's lots of trails. So it is, as we're thinking about coming out of COVID and launching into the future, the Simcoe County Forest is quite an asset that not a lot of municipalities have. We still have corridors, wildlife corridors that are connected. We still have cold and cool water streams, a lot of it because of the forest cover that's available and the plentiful groundwater that comes up that's very cool. These are ecological assets that places around Toronto, Southern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario just do not have. And so if we're to have a shake at making sure that Simcoe County is resilient, the Simcoe County forests have to be seen as a key cornerstone of that, not just to not make silly decisions about paving it when there's absolutely industrial land available for it, but also to figure out how to replenish the forests, how to nurture the forests, to make sure that they will be healthy and be able to sequester the amount of carbon that they need to and prevent flooding. Now, I know the county has been purchasing more sites, and that's great. And so I applaud them for trying to expand it. But we still have to think about how to use these forests in a way that allow our economy and allow the people and communities here to thrive. And I don't know if if the local governments have really transitioned to that mindset of how to use those as a launching pad and an asset versus land banks.
I mean, we've talked about this a fair bit, how difficult it is for them to, in a revenue constrained situation, to be able to value things that don't necessarily provide monetary revenue. How difficult it is for them to value those in the long term. And then, there's the 4-year election cycle that plays into this, and that can be, complicate decisions around protecting longer term assets, which generally are sort of public good environmental assets. So we're coming up on the 40-minute mark here. We should just program a little sort of bell or buzzer or something to go off when we hit like the 30-minute mark, Margaret. So we get to talking and then we don't stop. Mary, so you mentioned that you guys have a letter writing campaign, and maybe you can just direct people to where and how they can help out with that, and your social media, they can get involved. Yeah.
So Friends of Simcoe Forest has a Facebook page, and on the Facebook page, we've got a few organizations that have placed up action pages for us. So anywhere there, you can find the letter, click on it. Change it if you like, put your name and your address on it, and send it off to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Stephen Clark, and his email address is there as well. We also have our website, which is www.friendsofsimcoeforest.com, and you can find our letter posted there as well under links and downloads. There's a lot of nice material there. You can see what has been going on over the 4 years since we've been organized and put together. And the letter writing campaign, I know it seems like it's just a drop in the bucket, but letter writing campaigns have changed politicians' minds because those letters account to votes. So it is important that that gets communicated. If you agree that this facility does not belong in a forest, if you agree that the province should not be able to dictate what happens and shuts down the citizens' ability to have their voice heard, then you really do need to find this letter and send it off to the minister and make it known that this is not just a local issue anymore. This is a provincial issue. When the province can make a decision to shut down the citizens' right to process, and it's just not right. So have your voice heard, find the letter, and send it off.
Fantastic. Margaret, do you want to add anything? I'm gonna make a couple of notes on some upcoming episodes.
No, I think that's good. I think Mary did a great job. Thank you for that. And I think what we should put in, Adam, is like buzzer beater questions at the end, like, top 5 or something. We should do something like fun at the end. We should figure out something like that. So that's the only thing I have to add. Otherwise, I'm good.
All right. So we're going to do that for next time.
All right, we'll do it.
Okay. So we've got a couple of really great recordings that I am working on editing. One, we may have mentioned this. One is with Heather Keem from the Tamarack Institute. I think we did talk about this, where we talk about asset-based community development. I'm working my way through that. It should be edited, and hopefully we'll have that out next week or this coming week. And subsequent to that, I spoke with Deanna Butts, who works for the town of Stony Plain in Alberta. And she explained their this really neat initiative, or there's a set of initiatives actually that they're doing, which could all be sort of categorized as asset-based community development, and their community connectors program. So really they're sort of weaving together their community and nourishing the connections that neighbors have with other neighbors, and identifying who needs help and who has things to offer and all these sorts of things. And that was a great conversation. So we'll have both of those out within the next couple of weeks. And otherwise, we'll be doing another one of these next week. And I don't know who we'll have on or what we'll talk about, but it'll be amazing. Yeah.
It's a big mystery.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much for giving us a chance to talk about our concerns.
And thank you to all the birds there too for lending their voices. That was a nice ad.
And my dogs. Don't forget my dog.
Marley. My dog's totally passed out on the floor here. He's waiting for me to take them out. Okay, well, stay safe, everyone, and hope you enjoy this episode.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.